Yo, welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Today we're going over Noctis, released last week as part of the Final Fantasy 15 collaboration. Really great character, super excited to talk about him, so let's not wait any longer. The review breakdown for what you're going to expect here, it's the character overview, report card and stat analysis, some general thoughts that I have to kind of sum them up at a high level, class and job overview, going through the abilities individually, and then really just going over some of the vision cards, espers, and weapons to how you might want to optimize them potentially. Getting into the general overview, brand new Earth unit. We've had a lot of them recently, so he fits into a lot of the newer current meta units. For jobs, they've given him the Crown Prince, unique job to him as the main job and sub-job. He's got Spellblade and Ninja as well. He can equip swords, and then he's had Cloth and Accessory for the rest of it. Move of 3, jump of 1, but he's got way more mobility than that. We'll get into that soon. In terms of the resistances overall, pretty great resistances. Only -1 is 5% to strike, which no big deal. Obviously, if you're going to counter him with Wind, Tifa, and 2B, you're going to abuse that, but that's really just it for the most part. And then for the status ailments, it's 50% Berserk and 50% to Immobilize, which is pretty okay. Berserk, obviously, if there ever comes a King Mont meta, could be better for resist, but not the worst thing in the world given the uniqueness of it. So getting more into the DPS report card for him, and this is going to go really quickly. I'm not going to go in as depth as I used to, but still general point across. Effective HP, he's an A. So when we talk about effective HP, it's essentially what his health points are, but you add in some adjustments for defense, spirit, the resists of the weapon types, things of that nature, so that it's not necessarily what his health pool is, but really how much damage you need to do to him in order to kill him. So from that perspective, that's an A. His physical HP, it's an A+. He might be the bulkiest DPS in the game, and quite honestly, he's like tank levels of effective HP when you think about what he can potentially do. Magical HP is also an A, slightly less as good, but right there at the top of the end of the game. His primary stat is an A, so I have a couple listed out here just as some comps where if you're looking at his attack stat, 473, and this is without passives, versus 504 of Cloud and 496 of Oberyn. Right competitive with them, and it's he's got a lot of penetration potential and a few different kinds of attack types. So that stat's really strong considering what he has for penetration. We'll get to more of that soon. From an agility standpoint, he's average, a little bit above average at a B. He does have a passive that can boost his agility, which is great, so that's kind of what bumps him up, but nothing crazy. It's pretty competitive. From an accuracy standpoint, C-. He is terribly inaccurate, way below the game average. He does have a 100% hit chance attacking his kids, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but the rest of them, you definitely want to gear him from some aim and accuracy, considering the top end of the meta that we're seeing between the dark element, the light element, the other earth element. So there's a lot of evasion at the top end of the game, and he really needs some help if you're going to try to potentially hit them. From an evasion standpoint, C, completely average. Don't equip him for evade. Even if you're running an evade comp, he will very likely not dodge anything. Movement is an A+, absolutely stellar movement in the game. We're going to get to why. Despite the fact that he's got a move of 3 and a jump of 1, there's a lot of things in his kit that end up bumping that up. From a passives perspective, it's a B. They're good passives, not the best passives. There's only 4 of them, so there's really only a couple ways you can build them, but they're pretty good overall in the broad scheme of the game. From his counter potential abilities, a C-. They're all really average. They're not that great. We'll get into more of that soon. The overall kit, though, is an A+. He's got an absolutely amazing kit that the abilities overall just do a lot of really great things, a lot of really unique things to him. We're going to get into that soon. The final grade overall is an A. He's a great character, really a missing piece to the Earth cast, so very happy he's here. Going to have a lot of fun slotting him into some of the Earth comps that we've been seeing. So some general thoughts overall. Extremely tanky. He basically is a tank, despite the fact that he's a DPS in a couple different ways. He has a very high effective HP. He's got 10 defense and 6 spirit innately. He has an ability that gives him 20 defense to start as a buff. He's got another ability that gives himself protect and AoE 20 spirit to himself and allies. So he's got a lot of different ways to boost those stats right at the start of the fight. He's got an ability on his sub-job that can give a 1500 HP shield. A little more niche, but it exists. It's there. A passive that has 12% either element resistance or magic resistance, so that element resist is actually really important for protecting against imperils, and it's not affected by any kind of penetration. There's really not any kind of like earth resistance penetration or light resistance penetration. That doesn't exist. So the fact that he has a 12% element resistance, really great for his effective HP. And then Spellblade subjob has both a magic barrier and the magic resistance ability, which is the 38% buff. So both ways to potentially hedge against physical and magical damage, which is really cool. Really versatile attack types as well when you're talking about how he can potentially slice and dice you. So he's got 9 slash types, 3 non-type, meaning they don't have anything. They're just they're typeless. 1 pierce and 1 strike ability. So he's got a couple different ways he can come at you, but the most important thing is that he's got 25 defense penetration innately. That's part of his Trust Mastery. And he has up to 95% slash resistance penetration. I actually can't believe that's a thing. That's ridiculous. So we're going to get into how he can equip that, but between his vision card, between the engine blade, and between one of the external vision cards, he can basically ignore almost all of the slash resistance you could build up, which is nuts. That's nuts. I don't think I've ever seen anyone get that high in terms of a penetration before. Amazing Earth synergy with the cast. He functions very well in terms of solo units. He does really well with the vision cards overall. Excellent anti-courage or re-raise unit via weapon call, which is an ability we're to get to soon, where essentially when you do one of those buffs, the 20 defense buff, it essentially makes so that when he attacks, he has a follow-up attack afterward that essentially it goes his attack, the courage procs, and then he attacks again. So he can potentially kill them with re-raise if he does enough damage, but courage definitely because they're at 1 HP. No significant weaknesses. I mean that genuinely. Like, unless you're running the strike wind comp, there really isn't any one way to say, how do I counter Noctis? There really isn't like a hard counter or a hard weakness you can exploit because it's got so many ways that you can be built to mitigate that. Great tank option via Spellblade. That's one thing that I think the Earthcast was missing, was a legitimate tank. Obviously, King Miraga has some ability, but he's very weak against, magic attacks. And then Winter Venera was a good tank, but she's supremely weak to missile, so it makes it hard in a Jaden meta. But a great tank option, really the best for the Earth units, which is pretty cool. Weirdly significant magic build, worth mentioning, where he can get up to 600 plus magic pretty easily. And that's important when you talk about the Spellblade sub-job, where if he's going to be using that Spellblade abilities, he's going to have enough magic that it's actually going to do some decent damage. So he's got a base magic of 297, Oath of Salvation, which is his vision card, gives 116, and the Engine Blade can give roughly about 100 magic on most of the builds. So that's pretty cool when you talk about overall DPS output, which is why it's a pretty great unit. Class and job overview. So getting into things, the passive abilities, only 4, as I mentioned. Successor to the Throne, I think you're always going to have equipped. Not only is it the attack buff, but also the elemental resistance. And then the Shikuchi ability here, the move 1, jump 1, is another reason why his mobility is so great, where you could potentially throw this on. And obviously he's got a bunch of different ways to potentially move. But Shadow Runner is obviously also another good one too, where that agility makes him faster. The luck will help his accuracy just a little bit. So overall, you got a couple different ways to potentially build him. The counter abilities, this is where I think he was lacking, where he's got the physical guard and a magical guard, and although 45% of damage reduction is pretty cool, it's only a 20% chance to proc, and you can only pick one or the other, so it's okay. It's a good ability, but like it's not great in the broad scheme of the game. From the perspective of his main job, the Crown Prince, this is where things get really cool. So this second ability here, Power of the True King, we'll get into that in a second. Actually, screw it, we'll skip ahead. So Power of the Future King, or True King, uses ability, increases defense by 20. It's also a magic and attack buff for him, but then it also enables his weapon call ability, which is a typeless attack type, can basically hit anywhere, doesn't cost you an AP, but essentially what happens is once you've used this buff, anytime you go to attack afterward, you will essentially have a second attack follow-up, and that happens for 3 turns after you use this buff. So when you're talking about Dispelling Courage, a really important way for you to essentially one-hit someone if that's the case. Getting back to the job here, though, this Relay's Fall, again, this is the Japanese translation, so forgive me. This is the 100% hit chance ability, which is pretty cool that it's an AoE. Decrease CT, it's nice considering, get a little extra turn advantage potentially, but it's also a pierce attack, which is really important, that if you're using this to potentially, guarantee hits on people, they can't guard against everything. They have to pick their type. So the fact that this is a pierce type attack means it's going to on average do more damage. This map shift, really, really cool. This is one of the ways, one of the 3 ways that he essentially has amazing mobility. This map shift, shift break, and shift assault all move him to wherever he wants to go. So not only does he have the potential passive of the move 1, jump 1, but this ability will physically put him somewhere else. In particular for the map shift, this one's really great because it works like 2B's ability, Resistance Field, where it will teleport him to the ally, he'll use it, and then he can move afterwards. So incredible amount of mobility there, and this increases spirit for 20 turns to himself and allies, gives himself protect as well. So really great overall ability for his tankiness. This shift break is a defense break of 30. This is awesome. Obviously, reducing the counter chance is really cool, too, when you talk about stopping reflex and things of that nature. And then shift assault's a good one, too. Not my favorite ability, but considering the AP options he has here, 21 AP is the cheapest of most of the abilities. So you'll probably use this one a fair amount, given that it also increases agility for himself, which he kind of needs to stay competitive with the turn order of the light cast, but that's to be seen. It does break a physical barrier though, which is a nice piece of utility on it. When you talk about his sub job, so he's got a triple hit ability here in the sub job, which is obviously great for some PvE potential. Shift Bash is not bad. This is the one that has that 15 HP shield, decreases agility for target. This is a good sub job overall in the broad scheme of things. I tend to keep the Spellblade on so far because I want him to proc hate, and I do think the magic barrier is pretty valuable, and we're getting to that right now, where I think out of everything here, that's probably the two that you'll ever really use. It's either going to be the attract spell or the magic barrier. Magic resist is good, but we're not in a big magic meta at the moment, but the fact that he has it really, has some good lasting power down the line. And then the sub job of the ninja, this is really really niche. I think it's really just here to give him the passive and to give him the stats. I don't think you're ever going to use this in any capacity. From a limit break perspective, this is a really great limit break. So it's got 3 imperils on it, upwards of 25%. This is one of the typeless attack types. So when you talk about being able to, ignore someone's high slash resist, this is a really important part of that. 43 AP is relatively cheap considering it's a triple imperil. The range on it's kind of lacking, but overall really strong ability, particularly because he not only has access to some of these different types of attacks, but when you look at someone like Oberyn, Zazan, they're going to get a lot of upside DPS output from this as well. The TMR, this is a good TMR. It's not my favorite, but it is a good one. It's an armor, so obviously it's debatable whether or not you think the armor is better than the other ones available. There's not really a ton of amazing costs, but this is competitive. It's really the ability, obviously. 2 casts is really strong. Most TMRs only have 1, but the fact that it says auto restore of AP 5%, it's nice. And then the protect obviously makes it so that you don't have to use his regular ability. You could use this instead to get that same access to protect. And obviously you can put this on anyone. It doesn't have to be on Noctis. So good overall. The mastery, nothing special other than the defense penetration 25, which we mentioned earlier. In terms of notable vision cards, his vision card by far the best for him, but there are some really good options. Otherwise, this has some great stats, as we mentioned, both attack and magic, which he can benefit from. The earth attack up, HP 5%. He ended up giving a global buff of 40% slash resistance penetration, which is nuts. 40% slash resistance penetration is equal to the passives on most characters. The fact that he can get this for free on a vision card is crazy. The party effects are really great. That dexterity stat actually does help his accuracy a decent amount, not incredibly so, but every bit helps. The magic resistance of 20%, also another way for him to essentially be really tanky against a variety of attack types. If we're looking at some of the other cards, you obviously can put these cards on him as well. I think they're best on a teammate, but you can put it on him. What I was talking about earlier with the 95% slash resistance penetration, it's as if you have Solitary Lion on a teammate. So if he has Oath of Salvation on and you have Solitary Lion on Zazan, Noctis gets 95% slash res penetration with the Ancient Blade also equipped. So these are also really great options. All of them synergize extremely well with what he wants to do. They're such well-rounded vision cards that you could put any of them on him and he's still going to be really great. In terms of notable espers, I think these are my 3 favorites. Golem obviously has the defense. Titan new 3-star upgrade has the spirit nodes on it if you want to give him that stat instead. Alphacaris obviously has a bunch of different things with earth attack and whatnot, but you could do a bunch of different kinds, honestly, because it really just depends on how you're trying to build your Noctis, whether you want him for a little more agility, whether you want him for a little more tankiness, if there's a specific resist you want in mind, like missile resist on Death Machine or a slash resist on Siren. A couple of these have magic resist like Fenrir and Omega while also having slash attack up, so really a bunch of different ways you could build them. I think all these espers have an opportunity to really thrive, so no real preference. And the weapon optimization, I think the Ancient Blade is by far the best weapon for him. This is the extra slash resistance penetration we mentioned. Overall, great stats. I prefer the crit build personally because I think it's a good blend of both attack and magic and also the accuracy and crit rate, but Assault certainly has its place as well. The Aim Blade, iffy. I know he needs a lot of help with the accuracy, but if there's a character that really needs that, I think it's probably just best to go for the Alexandrite ring in some instances, but the aim build certainly a viable one as well. And then after that, it's really your preference. The Spine Blade's a really good option, a different kind of ability where it's the defense penetration instead, so this will put him at 45% defense penetration. You don't see many high defense units now because of the light meta, but it's there, it's access to it. And then the Lazalia Royal Guard, this is a unique sword too, just because of the accuracy on it that still retains an 8% modifier, still has a great attack stat, gives them the accuracy, but really at the end of the day, there's a bunch of options. The Nagnarok is certainly on the table as well. Little power crept at this point, but nothing too crazy. Overall, some pretty good options for him. And that's Noctis in a nutshell, so hopefully you've had some fun building him. I think he's a great unit for the Earthcast. Very necessary cog in that machine, and really looking forward to seeing what he can do at the top end of the game. So thanks for watching. Hopefully this was informative, and I'll talk to you all soon.